Now that we know some of the keyboard shortcuts to move around within a large range of cells, let's try a couple things. Let's try to, off to the left here in columns B and C, I'm going to zoom in just a little bit. We see that ideally I'd like the average and the total for this entire row, right? So if I wanted the total, I could do sum, right, equal sum. We start formulas and functions with an equal sign, sum, and then come over here, and if I, click and drag my mouse, right, I gotta go all the way to the end, right, there we go, 50, right, close off the parenthesis and hit enter. Well, that seems like there should be a simpler way to do that, right? There is. So I'm going to delete that, and I'm going to show you how to do it with keyboard shortcuts. So I'll do equal sum, open parenthesis, and then hit the right arrow key twice. So I'm at the beginning of the data that I want, which is an E9. Hold down the control and the shift key, right arrow. So it selects everything from E9 up to BB9. I can see that up here in the formula bar right here, right? So it's selected all that. Then I just hit Shift 0, the close parenthesis, and hit enter. And I get the same thing. All right? So that's an easy way to select a whole bunch of contiguous data within a single row. Control Shift right arrow. Now ideally I would also like to be able to drag this all the way down for all 1000 rows that I have. So you might be aware of a thing called autofill. What that is when you take your mouse pointer, your cursor, and point it all, right now it looks like the red cross symbol, the white plus sign there. If you take it and move it to the bottom right hand corner, it changes to a black plus symbol. From here, a lot of times you can just do double click. You may have heard I just tried to do it. It doesn't work, right? I can drag it though, right? So I can drag it down, and we see that it came down. We can see that it went down to cells E10, right? The next one up here, E11. Right, so it's moving down the row, but I have 1000 rows of this, so that's not so much fun to do, right? So what I could do, if the autofill, when I move this mouse over here and double click down, it only works when stuff is immediately to the left of it, so it can try to figure out what you're trying to do. So if I had all the data in the average column here for all the rows, I would get all of this. So let's try to fill in the average stuff. I'm going to do a same thing, but this time what I'm going to do is I want to fill in all rows for the average. So ideally I'd like to hold down Control Shift down arrow key, but that goes past the yellow part because there's nothing in the cells, right? It's just colored. It just has shading of yellow. So what I need to do is I'm going to come over to here to heading 1. I'm going to do Control down arrow key to get to the bottom of the data that I'm interested in. I'm going to go ahead and use my arrow key to get over to the last cell right here. That's yellow. And then hold down the Control Shift up arrow. Now I've got one extra value up there in row 8 that I don't want. So I let go of the Control key. I keep the Shift down, and I hit the down arrow key one time. Right. So now I have those 1000 rows selected. Now what I do is I say equal, and notice because I started on the bottom, it takes me down to the bottom to where I'm entering in the data down here. Right. And now I can do sum. Now that we're doing average here, so average, and then I'm going to mouse over to the data and do Control Shift right arrow to get all the way to the far right, selecting it all. Close off the parenthesis. Do not hit enter yet. In order to make it to go for all of the cells, I do a Control enter. So Control enter. And now if I come back over to here and I go up, I see that they're all filled in, and they look like they're doing it right. I can see that up in the formula bar up here as I go down, right? These are all changing as I go down, right, to the right rows. Now, in theory, because I have that, I ought to be able to come over here and autofill this guy. Let's get rid of this because it didn't like that. And let's come over here and let's autofill it down. Now, because I have all this data on the left, this works autofilling it with that going to the far right and double clicking to go down. So that's one way to get in a bunch of formulas across different ranges very easily, is with the Control Enter after selecting where you want the stuff to go. So now let's do the same thing. Now I want the total and the average for each of these columns. Okay. So we'll do total first. It doesn't really matter. Sum, and I come down to here and I do Control Shift down arrow. Right, close it off, hit enter. Right, but really what I want is I want to do it all at the same time, right? So I'm gonna go ahead and just delete that. I'm gonna come down to here, go all the way up, all the way to the end, to column BB, come up, Control Shift left arrow, Shift right arrow 2 times, right, to get that. And I'll do equal, this was the total, so sum, come down with my down arrow key, Control Shift down arrow to get all those selected, close off the parenthesis, and then hit Control Enter. And then I'm going to hit Control Home to go all the way up to the very top so I can see what this looks like. So Control Home takes me all the way up to A1. Alright, so I have all that. Now I want to do the same similar thing, right, for average. So I'm going to again go to the far right, come up, Control Shift left arrow, Shift right arrow, equal average, open parenthesis, come down to the data that I'm interested in that column, Control Shift down arrow, close the parenthesis, and then hit Control Enter. And I'll hit Control Home, take me back up, and we see that it all filled in. Now these two numbers, the average and total, look very, very similar. That's because we have 1,000 rows of data. So we take the total and divide by 1,000, so it moves the decimal over 3 places. So that's why they look the same. So that's a good way to move around quickly and add in a bunch of different formulas for contiguous data. Right? Now we were able to autofill after we did the average to the stuff on the right. And then we'll look at some other ways of trying to maybe do something similar in just a bit.